I'll just launch in. Okay, hi everybody. You're listening to a career advice webinar by the Royal Australian Chemical Institute, the Professional Association for Chemists in Australia. I'm Dave Samet, the Principal of DCS Technical and the Coordinator of the RACI Mentoring Program. Tonight is a new workshop format that we're trying out. It's only our second time doing this, so please bear with me while we figure this all out together. The aim is for this to not be a lecture, but to rather be an interactive workshop where we discuss and practice the key skills for really successful job interviews. I welcome anyone who is interested to join me here as a panelist. All you have to do is put up your hand. And if you don't feel like being a panelist, you can always ask questions via the Q&A function. Before we start this evening's workshop, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting all around Australia. We recognise the elders past, present and emerging, and also recognise their contributions as Australia's first scientists and engineers, building a healthy and safe community, what they've done and what we can still learn from their ways. I would also like to thank the sponsors of the RACI Careers Development Program, DCS Technical, Envirolab and Laboratory Credit Union. I'm very fortunate to already be joined by Bathika, one of our very active mentees in the 2021 mentoring program. I welcome anyone else who is interested to come up and join me here. Simon, I'm going to pick on you and ask you if you'd be willing to join me up here. Miranda, I'm going to ask you to speak at one point. And anyone else, or somebody's put their hand up. Here we go. Who's put that? Yep, Simon, great. Up you come. Let's be a panelist. And Miranda, here we go. Promote to panelist. Great. And Janice, absolutely great. Promote to panelist. Fabulous. Okay. Now, if anybody wants to join in later on, you're always going to be welcome. So, but thank you all for coming up and joining me tonight. So, as I say, look, interviews. There's so many things about interviews, and I could talk for an hour about how to do really good interviews. But the core messages that I really want to get across to everybody is first that skills can be taught in any job, personality can't. Your biggest asset in the entire recruitment process, and certainly in the interview, is yourself, okay? And you don't have to pretend to be someone you're not in an interview. Miranda and I actually went through this, a week ago, this very discussion, that you don't have to pretend to be someone that you're not. All you have to be in an interview to be successful is the best version of yourself. That's all you need. And the other thing that I think is important to understand is that nerves are normal in any interview. So plan for them, deal with them. But even if you're still nervous in the interview, that's fine. Understand that I know as your interviewer that once you have worked for me for a month or 2 months, hopefully less, you won't be nervous. You'll be comfortable in the environment and around us and your colleagues. And so I try to we professional recruiters try to look past your nerves to the person underneath. So it doesn't matter if you're a bit nervous. It's okay. All right. Now, the thing I want to focus on for tonight's interview is the behavioral-based interviewing. Most professional interviewers will use this as their key approach to interviewing. And that is the principle that the best predictor of your future behavior is your past behavior. So rather than asking a hypothetical question about what would you do in this situation, we're going to ask you directed questions about what did you do when you were faced with a similar situation. And your response will follow what's called the STAR pattern: situation, task, action, response. Now, Simon, you and I have been through STAR in the past, haven't we? Right? We've practiced STAR and all that sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of rules, and look, there's videos. I'll put links at the end of this to key videos on how to do interviews and whole lectures on how to do STAR story and that sort of stuff well. But to keep it short and to get into practicing STAR stories, situation, you're going to describe the situation you're in, the work that you are being asked to perform, the challenge that you are being faced with. It's very much the who, what, when, where, how, right? The task. So you go from a we statement, we as a team were asked to do this, to a very much an I statement. My task was, what was your responsibility? Then the action that you took in response to the situation you were being faced with. How did you address the challenge? How did you meet the task? And lastly, the response. What was the outcome of the contribution that you made? Situation, task, action, response. There are variations to that acronym, but that's the one that I use. Okay. So we then are going to ask these open-ended questions, and I'm going to bring some examples of that. But the hang on a sec, where are my star story examples? I'm having trouble finding them now. Ah, here we go. All right. So Simon, you're on the blocks. Let's do a practice one. So star stories tend to fall into three main categories. When did you go well above and beyond what was expected of you in the role? When did you have to work with or deal with someone that you didn't like? And when did you do, what is something that you're particularly proud of, basically? Okay. So Simon, the classic, tell me about a time when you had to go above and beyond to get a task done.
Sorry, I don't have mine in front of me.
Yep. Okay, now while Simon's thinking, I'm going to give you a moment to think. I'm going to introduce my little interview trick. That is, whenever you go to an interview, you're going to be offered tea, coffee, or water. And your first instinct is going to be to say no, because you don't want to trouble them. The best answer is yes, a water would be lovely, thank you. Don't trouble them for tea or coffee, but a water would be lovely, thank you. Firstly, it's a nice positive response, establishes your politeness. But secondly, the giving and receiving of a small gift is central to many cultures for the very good reason that it establishes a bond at the beginning of a relationship. You accept that drink, you've taken a small bond, but you now also have a prop, so that when someone asks you a difficult question and you don't have to say, you can now go, oh, that's an interesting question. And you have 10 seconds of free thinking time. I mean, you can't use it on every question, obviously. You'd look weird if you did. But when you're faced with that difficult one, it's a simple technique to buy some time while you think, while maintaining poise. So Simon, tell me about a time when you had to go above and beyond. Situation, task, action, response.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually adapt your question very slightly. Just the have to bit. I'm going to tell you about a time that I went above and beyond more because I wanted to than I had to. So I was using this pain in the ass software for reducing some annoying data. And I realized that everyone was doing this same thing. And it was this multi-step process that if you have lots of samples, you have to do it all manually. It's a pain in the ass. So I took it upon myself to kind of figure out how I can improve upon that for everyone other than me, as well as myself. So I went away, learned a whole bunch of coding. I knew a little bit of it beforehand, but went into a lot more depth with it and came back with an automated solution. And I then gave that to the instrument scientist who distributed it among all the people using the instrument, and everyone's life's a lot easier now.
Excellent answer. Short, to the point, ticks all the boxes and shows that you have the get up and go. It's an excellent answer. Okay. It's almost as if you've been mentored. A couple of suggestions I would make. Firstly, obviously, don't swear. Now, we all know that I swear like a sailor on leave, and that's a terrible habit of mine, but don't swear in an interview, okay?
Yeah, it's my bad of me who hasn't did it.
It's also a sign that I didn't notice that he swore. So I think that means that I swear a little bit too much as well.
Yeah. Do you know, I was almost a choir boy. Like, I was so innocent, and then I joined the mining industry, and it just ruined me. So, so apart from the swearing, I love that bit at the beginning. I'm going to tweak your answer because it wasn't a task I had to do, it was a task I wanted to do. Outstanding answer. I just outstanding and yeah, beautiful reframing of the question. Really liked that. The only thing that I would, if it's true, that I would have tweaked in that answer is when you said I went off and learned some coding. If it's true that you did it in your own time, I would say in my own time, I went off to learn some coding. If you did it on company time, so be it. But I guess you don't want to have the subtext there that when I'm on work hours, I'm just doing my own thing, doing what I want to do and not what I'm told to do. So you just got to be, this is a key trap for any star story. You've not only got to look at what you're saying, but what's the subtext. So if it's true that you did it on your own time, I'd say so. If it's not true that you did it on your own time, it would be better if you were able to say, I spoke to my supervisor. I said, I've had an idea about how I can make this better. And he said, yeah, go for it, or something like that. You know,
yeah, good idea.
Yeah, just that minor tweak. Okay. Janice, can we have a try? Tell me about a time when you had to balance competing priorities to achieve an outcome. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be fair to you. I'm going to give you one to think about. I'm going to give you that to think about. I'm going to go around and give everyone one to think about. So you've got a little bit of thinking time. Okay.
Simon didn't get any thinking time.
So yours, yeah, I know. So yeah.
It's all right. You're his mentor.
Yeah, that's right. I can do what I like. All right. Miranda, why don't you think about a time when you had to achieve an impossible deadline? And Bathika, can you give me about a time when you showed initiative in your work? Okay.
I want this one, actually.
You want to talk about, I'll let you do it. That's fine. You tell me about the one I want, but then you can move on as well. Okay. So circling back to you. So the questions are for Janice. Tell me about a time when you had to balance competing priorities to achieve an outcome. Miranda is, tell me about a time when you had to achieve an impossible deadline. And Bathika is, tell me about a time you showed initiative at work. Coming back to you, Simon, your question is going to be, tell me about a time when you failed at a task. So everybody's had a little bit of thinking time. Janice, you're up.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you about a time during my internship as an undergraduate chemist. So I was in a relatively small lab group of about 5 people, and I was one of the 2 chemists within the group. And for my for my internship, I basically got given 3 projects to complete within a given time span. And the internship itself was limited to about 6 weeks because it was fly in, fly out work. So I basically had 7 days, blocks of 7 days to complete tasks in. And so I first started off by working out a plan with my manager about what I would start off with initially. However, the issue then came about that my manager then went away on Christmas holidays. And so I had to do a lot of self-management and independent work myself in balancing these, not only balancing these different projects together, but also in that I didn't necessarily always have the chemical expertise that I needed, which was then when I went and relied on the other members of the team in the lab technicians. And so I basically worked by starting off with one of the more simpler tasks first, which was chemical auditing. And so I set up a system for the chemical auditing, and that allowed me to, when I had smaller blocks of time, to then go back and do little bits of the chemical auditing when I was working on my larger tasks. I then went and started on the project about carbon sulfur analyzing. And so that was setting up a calibration curve for a brand new instrument and seeing if all the chemical digestions that we were completing at the mine would work with this new instrument. And so a lot of that that involved a lot of hands-on work, but also a lot of waiting around, which is when I went and managed that first chemical auditing project. And then I also, in between all of that, managed to complete part of the third project, which was X-ray fluorescence, creating a commercial analysis method for that. And I don't know if you know much about X-ray fluorescence, but basically you have to put samples in a really, really hot furnace and make these glass borate samples. And so was each time, which gave me sufficient time to sort of manage my time between the other two projects and allowed me to balance all three projects at once and get them almost all completed before the end of my internship. However, we did run into technical difficulties that required an engineer to come out to site to manage the instrument.
Okay, excellent. Follow-up question, were you using wavelength or energy dispersive X-ray?
Energy dispersive, I believe.
Okay, nice. And why do they use energy dispersive on a mine site rather than wavelength?
I am not sure about that.
Probably
a little bit more technical than I was.
The answer is because energy dispersive is a great deal more compact.
Well, there you go.
So, not quite as accurate, but more compact. So it's very good for mining purposes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just but that's a beautiful example.
It's the mining background,
right? So it was a very good answer. It was a little bit on the long side.
Yeah,
and
I felt that.
What you finished well. What you could have started with a little bit is to make it clearer that you had three projects that all needed to be done at once, because it didn't become clear that there were three competing projects until well into the story.
Okay.
So again, just remembering. I mean, it was an excellent thing of juggling priorities, and towards the end, it became clear that you were actually answering the question that you were asked, but at the beginning, it wasn't as clear.
Yeah. So
it doesn't hurt to mirror their language back to them.
Yeah.
At the beginning of your answer. But the other thing I loved about your answer was it was a whole lot of I statements. This is what I achieved, but then there was this just beautiful little trick in there, or a little tail in there, where you said, and when I couldn't figure it out for myself, I went to the other lab techs. And it was just this wonderful moment of saying, you weren't alone out there. You were just being self-reliant. And there was this big flashing sign of self-reliant when you said that, which was just a wonderful piece of subtext. Subtext isn't always bad, by the way. Subtext can be good. And that was a very good subtext to that one. So I think the other one that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think of straight away at the beginning of their career, but as a recruiter, I would. You did an internship as a FIFO job. Like that just takes guts, that takes all kinds of self-reliant, like it just says that you are somebody who is your own person, right?
I also moved interstate to do it. I wasn't living at home then.
Right. Well, I got to say, those sort of things, they will just be massive positives when you're interviewing, right? So absolutely. Okay. I see that there is a question in the chat. You're most welcome. Put things in the chat. There's also the Q&A function. I will come to that, to the question in the chat, but let's just go around the room first. Miranda, your question was, tell me about a time when you had to achieve an impossible deadline.
Yeah. So I'll tell you about a time that I with my engineering society, hosted a career networking event just a few weeks ago. I still remember that initially I was only in charge of preparing the presentation slides and being the MC of the career event. And then suddenly our team leader, Olivia, was sick for the whole week. And then there was lots of things that haven't been settled down, and everything was super delayed. I still remember the event was scheduled to be held on Saturday, But on Sunday, we haven't even started to advertise the event. But usually we need to advertise it at least 2 weeks beforehand. And in this situation, I volunteered to set up a timeline just to make sure everyone know what their job is. Firstly, I create like a to-do list, listed all the tasks, including breaking them down into small components, deadline, task owners, and status. And I noticed that we haven't really talked too much with the guest speakers that we invited from the industry. So that I quickly hosted a short meeting with them just to double check, make sure that they cover all the contents they need to cover for students, but also not overlapping with each other. I also hosted a regular meeting within the committee members who are organizing this event, just to update everyone what's the progress, what should we need to do in the next few days. And after all these were set up, we successfully attracted 90 participants just in 4 days. And after the event, we got 100% satisfaction rate from the audience based on their feedback form. And also that was the first time I ever hosted an event and being an MC, which was really cool.
Outstanding. Okay, I've got a whole bunch to say about this, Miranda. Firstly, I want to just say, I am so proud of you. When I remember the first time that we met roughly 12 months ago to now, the confidence with which you speak, you thrill me, right? I know that you used to be quite nervous, and the confidence with which you just delivered that was excellent, okay? I loved the aspects that you didn't state it so much, but it was clear in your thing that you thought of a lot of things that needed to be done without having to be told.
Yeah.
And I also loved when you're talking about the outcomes, right? When you're talking about the response, quantifying your answer where you can is just fabulous. And that's the other thing that you did. You quantified your answer. So in all those respects, it was an absolutely excellent answer. What I would tweak a little bit, again, the question was, tell me about a time when you had to achieve an impossible deadline. You mentioned the Sunday to Saturday, but I think, again, I would mirror the language back and just say, trying to pull all of this together in just 6 days, that's damn near impossible to get it right? And just, again, mirror that language back. Just to make it clear that you're answering that you're answering the question they've asked you, not just the answer that you've got pre-prepared in your head. But yeah, no, in every respect, I'm very, very pleased with that answer. And I liked, again, a lot of I statements. I liked the word I volunteered to. That's always a good word to use. And yeah, and particularly that quantifying your answer at the end. Absolutely excellent. Now, everybody, I'm going to be asking Miranda to speak a little bit later. We actually did a little bit of work together a week or so ago because she was going for an interview it was a government job, wasn't it?
No, it was a brewery.
Oh, that's right. It was a brewery.
Lion.
But it was an unusual because she had to prepare a presentation for that.
Yeah, that was an assessment center. Yeah,
for the and I was just thrilled with what Miranda did. But because it's a little bit of a different interview, I'm going to ask Miranda to speak about that in a bit. Now, Bathika, turning to you, your question was, tell me about a time when you had to show initiative in your work. Is that the question I asked? I think it was. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. I will tell about my last job. So in my last job, I was working in a R&D lab as a lab assistant. So there actually I was measuring the concentration of active compound of different hygiene products. So when I was given a procedure sheet to follow to prepare the sample preparation and internal standard and external standard, I found the external standard and internal standard was prepared by different solvents. Then I think I thought that I have to sort it out because it should be prepared by same solvent. So first I discussed with my direct supervisor, and then she said me to think about that. So I was keep checking the methods, and I discussed with my colleagues who was working in instead of me before I joined. And then I found, yes, there are the procedure sheet needs some correction. So I made that correction with discussing my supervisor, and then I changed the method. So after that, when I was preparing the sample for DCMS, we were getting much better results than before. So, yes.
Excellent. All right. All good things. Things that I liked about it. The specific mention of an analytical technique is great at showing I know something about, or I have experience with this technique, right? I also liked that you showed initiative, which was the question, to identify the problem, but you didn't just go off and take action, because things like standards are very serious. They need to be right. And so you didn't just go off and take action, but you consulted with multiple colleagues to make sure that what you were doing was correct and needed. So, those are very good behaviors to have in a lab, okay? Noticing a problem and taking action on a problem are very good, but doing it in a collegiate way is even better. So those were some very good aspects. I liked the fact that, you mentioned the outcome, the improvement in the QC. I guess that you possibly could have been a little bit stronger on your opening and just getting to the point, this is the issue. But, overall, no, it was a very good answer. I don't think I've got a lot to critique on that one. Now, before I come to you, Simon, I asked you the question before about telling me about a time when you had to go above and beyond. I'm going to give you an example. This is actually a true example from my career. It was a very long time ago. And I'd like each of you to critique this answer. Tell me, is it good or is it bad, and why? Okay. So many years ago, I was working as an R&D chemist in an R&D lab. I was mid-level. In fact, I think I was running the lab by the time. It doesn't really matter that. But the technical director came to me and said, "Dave, it is. I need you to run this experiment tomorrow," were his words. I said, "No problem, boss." The next day, I got up in the morning and I felt like death on legs. I was really, really crook. But my boss had said, "I need this to happen tomorrow." So I dragged my sick carcass into work. I set up the experiment. I needed to take samples from it every 30 minutes, and I did. But in between those 30 minutes, I lay on the floor vomiting blood into a bucket. And I did that for 6 hours. And when the 6 hours was up and the experiment was up, I set up the rack of samples. I handed it to a colleague, asked him nicely to analyze them and report them to the boss, and took myself off to hospital, where I was admitted for the next 5 days. The boss visited me in hospital and he said, "Dave," he says, "I love your dedication." He says, "but it just wasn't that important." Now, I got the experiment done, but is it a good example of going above and beyond? Janice, you got your hand over your mouth. I think I can tell your response. Why is it not a good example?
I think it's not a good example because it doesn't necessarily show like what good you can do. Like, yes, it was dedication, but it's also a misinterpretation of your employee, like you as an employee will put your health on the line to do the work. Judgment. When really, like, you should be healthy and doing, like, when you're working. I also think in terms of how you actually answered it, like, let alone the actual example itself, there was a bit like a bit too much slang and like random metaphors, like, oh, puking blood into a bucket. And
no, literally vomiting blood into a bucket.
Oh, literally. Okay. Like the dead carcass comment and stuff, I feel like was like, maybe a little bit of that is like okay because it shows off your personality, but I just think it was a bit over the top.
I agree. Excellent. Anyone else got comments?
I'll also add in, just along the lines of analyzing it as an answer and excluding the example itself, the ending was really weak.
Yep.
It was the result.
Agreed. I got the experiment done, but it wasn't a good outcome, was it? No, absolutely.
And actually, I was thinking, as that person was working in a lab, in that situation, like when that person is vomiting and with blood, actually, how is the situation? Is it is it safe? Is it safe workplace?
You're absolutely right. I mean, in this case, the illness was non-communicable, but nonetheless, there's no good outcome of having someone being that unwell around other employees, right? So you're absolutely right. It was a safety risk from one end to the other. What did I learn from the outcome, Matt? I learned that there is actually such thing as a work-life balance. I was so, I don't want to say the word dedicated. I think that I was so fearful that I was junior that I had to do whatever was said under any circumstances. And I actually came to learn that there is a balance, that I had, that every employee in a company has respect. And you know, I mean, my boss visited me in the hospital. He says, Dave, he says, you know, I love your dedication. He was very pleased with my dedication, but he was shaking his head and saying, Dave, you know, I've lost you for 5 days, you know? So yeah, no, in every respect, that was not a good example. Okay, Simon, your question was, tell me about a time when you failed at a task.
It won't be quite as spectacular as your example. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my tutoring on the side. So I tutor high school students, maths, chemistry, etc. And I have one student in particular that earlier this year I was having a lot of trouble with. Their marks started declining. You know, I think they came in to me as about a 50% student and ended up hitting rock bottom at, I think, about 20% in their exams. And I've never encountered that before. I've always found that if I've got a bit of time working with the students, their marks do go up. So I had to figure out if there was something wrong with the way I was teaching this student, or just something that wasn't quite working. So I spoke to a more senior tutor, and we went through a recording of one of my lessons together. And they pointed out a few things that were a bit different between them and all my other students. And the main thing was frustration. I didn't realize the student was getting frustrated a lot more than I thought they were. So we started implementing just getting up in the middle of lessons and having just 5-minute rests and having a bit of a walk. And it helped heaps. They were able to focus more when we were doing the lesson. And now their marks are on a steady incline.
Excellent. Good example. Again, you know, the good use of the I statements, the good use of recognizing a problem and then talking with someone, seeking assistance to get it right. Okay. But not just assistance to tell me the answer, but to examine and consider and what can we do to improve, right? That's a good way to consult with someone. The solution, I wish it was a more academic solution rather than just stand up and shake it out, but you know, it is what it is, right? There was one other thing I wanted to say about it, darn it, and it's eluding me right now. Does anybody else have anything to say about it? We can all talk about it together, by the way. Yeah, go for it, Miranda. Did you want to say something? Oh, no. I thought I saw you reaching for your mouse to unmute.
I would have personally liked a little bit of quantification at the end there. Like you said, they're on a steady incline, but do you have a specific grade that they've gotten recently that shows that incline? I understand if it's been too recent though, like that this happened, that you don't have a grade yet, but
yeah, it's a good point. I'll try and figure out a grade for the future.
And the other thing that's come back to me, if you could show some sort of insight. So for instance, one of the things that I've learned as a mentor over roughly 10 years of mentoring is that every mentee is different. And I think that if you show the insight as a tutor, that every student is different. And I've learned that I have to adjust my ways to even though it's the same questions, everybody's different, and I have to adjust my ways, because that inspiration applies to everything in your career. The way I deal with one person isn't necessarily the way I deal with another person. And that is a very universal lesson to describe. Right? Okay.
I just want to add, sorry, I interrupted. I just want to add a little bit, like when Simon was describing, is it good to add something like change of some teaching method of some theories, or then student using some interactive way to teach the math so they become more interested about the topic, and it helps them to learn about the topic, something like that, like changing of the teaching method, or sorting out actually which group of students are suffering badly, and then taking care of them. It's just from my own experience of tutoring. I'm sharing. Yeah.
So to generalize that when you're doing a star story and you're talking about whatever task you have to do, if you are able to mention briefly the theory of the task that you're doing, if you're able to do it very, very briefly. So for instance, Bathika, you were talking about the standards before, just one sentence about the theory of standards. The solvents couldn't be different because they introduce a matrix effect into the analysis or something like that. You see, just putting a little bit of that theory in, or Janice, when you were talking about your XRF, just putting in a little bit of, like a tiny bit of theory about the XRF analysis, or your insight into it, that just, it can be as little as a few words, and those few words can be enormously powerful. So I mean, I think that what Bathika has said there could apply, to tutoring. Just talking like a few words about the theory of tutoring, that like, I think that you could strengthen there. Now, Miranda, I'm going to come.
Dave, actually, I have a question. Most of the cases when I have asked something like that, sorry, I got the question something like that. How do you deal the difficult situation? Or I face problem when I trying to say about the result, like the final situation, like situation, task, action, and then result. If you have some advice how to say the result at the end, it will be very good for me. Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
So 2 responses here. The other thing from Simon's one, whenever you're asked to deal with a negative, I always like to do what I call a positive sandwich. You start with a positive, you state the negative, you finish with a positive. In your case, Simon, you were asked, tell me about a time when I failed. You didn't tell about a time when you failed. You talked about a time when I was failing and turned it around. That's a beautiful way to answer that type of question, right? Absolutely beautiful. The same is, you're going to be asked about, like what Bathika just asked about, when you're having difficulties with a person or something like that. So you start with a positive statement. Look, everybody's different. I understand that I'm not going to get along with everybody in life, or I'm not going to immediately get along with everyone in life. In this situation, I was dealing with a difficult person, but we managed to deal with it this way and turn it around, right? positive, negative, positive. You've sandwiched it with positive, because in an interview, you always want to try and be as positive as you can. So Bathika, that's the answer. When you're talking about your results, always try to frame it in a positive respect, right? Even if it's a negative outcome, you know, yes, it was a negative outcome, but I learned this valuable lesson, and then putting on that positive outcome from it. Okay, you know. Now we've had the question from the floor. The first question I always use something along the lines: I volunteered to use my knowledge of and interest in social media to make our company accounts for our small family-owned business, 2 dental clinics. Not only did I manage these accounts, but I even taught my employer and colleagues and provided them with a social media plan. This managed to have our patients become more involved with the clinics. Yeah, great stuff to say, Twisha. You know, absolutely, that's a good example of going above and beyond. It's always important to understand when, particularly at the beginning of your career, for the most part, employers are not looking for your technical skills. They're looking for your personality. We're going to teach you to do the job. We can't teach you to fit into the company. So personal examples, showing that you get along with people, showing that you are versatile and flexible and easygoing and attention to detail and showing initiative, and like all of these things that I've just said, none of them are technical traits. They're all soft skills, right? I communicated well, I did this, right? All of those things are where you can focus. You don't have a broad, many of you won't have a broad a resume, but you still have personalities, and that's what you can utilize. So I'm going to go around. Janice, I'm going to ask you a question. Tell me about a time when you had to resolve a conflict with a colleague. Bathika, I'm going to ask you to tell me about a time when you had to exhibit leadership. And Simon, tell me about a time when you had to work with someone you didn't like. Now, while you think about that, Miranda, tell us about this interview process that you just went through.
Oh, yeah. So if I'm completely aware of that, the title of this event is Successful Interview, but I have to say that I did. It's absolutely an amazing experience for me. I learned.
Sorry, you just broke up there. Unfortunately, you weren't successful, but you still did well in the interview.
Yeah. So I would have to say that was absolutely an amazing experience. I learned heaps from that. So the position I applied for is an engineering graduate at Lions. And then the process was firstly very standard job applications online, and then a video interview center. And then in the assessment center, which was last week, there was a group activity with the other candidates, an individual presentation, and an individual interview. Very intensive process. So I'll focus more on saying the assessment center, I think, because that was so memorable, I would say. So the assessment center, in terms of like group activity, we were given a topic that was very interesting. So there was a scenario when that you're on a boat and you can take 10 items from a boat and then rank the importance of each item and give the reasons. So we work on these questions as a group. And actually the answer doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what the answer is. They just assess you, like how you work with people, how you communicate with people, what's your team value, I would say. I think I didn't do well in this activity because I was a little bit quiet, especially when people like trying to express their ideas at the same time. I was a little bit not that confident. But from what I see from other candidates, those who are really like shine in the activity are those, they're not dominant. They know how to lead people, but also give everyone a chance to speak, to express their ideas. They're good communicator and also listener. And then there's a individual presentation. The topic was given a few days beforehand. The topic was people, plant, and process. So describe the enablers and ideas in just 3 aspects that can enable the success of a modern brewery or a beverage manufacturing facility. When I got this topic, I was so overwhelmed. I have no idea what to say, but I talked to Dave. We have a very friendly conversation, and then I kind of reflect back to what I've done in my past few years, my projects, and I come up with a data-driven solution to bring innovations to people, plant, and process. So what I did was I took a very creative way to present my presentation. I was imagining myself as a development brewer in an imaginary brewery called Cat Brewery. And then I just present like what's our achievement in the past few years, because I can just say anything. This is just an imaginary brewery. And then how we did that by bringing innovations in people, plant, and process. And then just another like individual interviews with 2 team leaders, very standard interview, just like what we just practice, like behavioral questions, and then open-ended questions like, why do you want to join Lion? The things I think I can improve further was that next time I should keep my answers more concise. The answers I said, I think, was about like twice the length as I just said. And also I feel like they really like to throw a lot of questions at the same time. So there was a time I forgot what's the last question, and I just like went through it, and the question was, why do you want to join Lion? Such an important question, I just forgot.
Okay, yeah. Excellent. Miranda, thank you so much for that. Can I just say, I would absolutely love it if you would record your presentation for us to share. I was so thrilled with that presentation. It was so imaginative. It's so well used, great ideas, but you also put numbers against stuff. And yeah, sure, they were made up numbers, but the fact is you were showing that you were thinking like a business technical person. It was absolutely fabulous. And I think anyone would be thrilled to view that one. I also think if you're going to be in a group environment, it's better to be a little bit too quiet than a little bit too noisy. The noisy ones tend to get discarded. But one of the great techniques that you can do is, if there is a quiet person in the group, to turn to that person and say these words: I would like to hear what you have to say. Rather than saying, you haven't said anything, why don't you have a shot? You say, I would like to hear what you have to say. And those are immensely powerful. And I just say this, by the way, particularly to the men in the audience, those are words that should come out of your mouth in any meeting, not just a job interview. And you should be doing, particularly the women in the room, the respect of hearing what they have to say. It is a very famous thing that a woman will speak, and a few minutes later, the man will have her idea and everyone will congratulate him. So, as I always say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the precipitate. So, thank you so much, Miranda. That insight is absolutely excellent. And as I say, if you'd be willing to record your presentation, I would be thrilled to post it. Okay.
I can try.
So, Janice, tell me about a time when you had to resolve a conflict with a colleague.
I just quickly comment on that. If you're not a solution, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the precipitate. That is fantastic. I'm definitely, as David said in the group, I'm going to steal that as well. Anyway, let me get into it. So in 2019, I was volunteering as a residential advisor at the university halls at Monash. And so myself and two other residential advisors were tasked with some event planning, some event management of a university ball for the entire hall. So that's roughly 150 people. And so this was a process that took several months, about 4 months, I think, to be exact. And over the course of the first month or so, we had developed a schedule that we needed to stick to for booking different vendors for the event, including the venue and planning ticket sales, advertisements and all that sort of stuff for the event itself. And we were quite good at delegating as a team to who got which tasks and when they needed to be completed by. However, about a month into the planning process, the two other members were starting to fall behind on their tasks that they were delegated. And as someone who prides themselves in their time management skills, this started to create a conflict between myself and the other two residential advisors. And so after discussions with our manager, we all sat down and had a meeting with the manager present. And basically, I took on a very informal leadership role within the group of the three of us, basically where I would help the other two keep on track of their deadlines and all that sort of stuff. And after that meeting, everything else went really smoothly, and we successfully threw a ball for 150 plus people and had fun doing it.
Okay. And how was your relationship with those two RAs, after your discussion and through to the end?
Well, I can confirm that I am still really good friends with both of them. They're the RAs that I have the best relationship with, and I think it improved the relationship from what it was like before, even before the conflict happened. It sort of helped us to grow and bond together because we were more successfully throwing this event.
That's an important corollary that you'd want to include in your answer then.
Yeah.
Right? The one thing I'm always a little bit cautious about in any conflict resolution is if your solution to the conflict resolution was to go to a higher up, or if your solution included going to a higher up as opposed to resolving it directly with the person, then you want to make sure that it doesn't come across that you simply pulled rank on them, that the conflict was actually resolved and not just squashed.
Yeah.
Okay. But having said that, there were some really good things in there. I'm always cautious about the word leadership, but in that context, it was good. And particularly because it was followed by and helped them, right? Taking on other people's jobs and doing it for them is not a solution to a problem.
And that's not what I did.
Going to their higher up and making them do their job is not a solution to a problem. Working with people and finding a way to help make that outcome happen is a solution. And you described that. So in that respect, it was a very good thing. But again, I would, if you're saying that your relationship became stronger, we found the way to work together and our relationship became stronger, then you absolutely want to say that.
Yeah.
Okay. What question did I ask you, Bethika? Was it how to be strategic to meet your priorities? Was that the question?
No, it was how, when you exhibit leadership.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Yeah. So should I start?
Yeah. Go for it.
Thank you, Dave. Actually, in this to tell about my leadership, I will love to describe about my experience while I was running alcohol reduction experiment during my master's. And that time, actually, I have to work different people. Like that, if I want to say about the team was me, my supervisor, the winemaker, the lab manager, and the wine supplier. So I have to arrange all the materials for that experiment. And one master student was working with me. I have to train him, and I need to conduct 18 experiments within 3 weeks of time. So the whole thing I have to plan first, and then during planning I have to include the training part of that master student, and then I have to contact with these different lab, like winemakers and then lab managers, time to time, to get the support from them to run my experiment smoothly. So and end of the like within 3 weeks, I was able to complete my all experiments with that team.
Excellent, excellent. So good things. Now, interestingly, virtually everyone you described as part of that team were people who might have been considered senior to you. So your leadership was a little bit of managing upwards, which is a skill in and of itself. Yeah. And that's a very good thing to describe. Leadership is a very fraught term in Australia because we don't live in big hierarchical companies. You know, we're not like America, right? And so you use the term leadership very cautiously, particularly at the beginning of your career. The last thing that anyone wants is a fresh graduate coming out. I mean, obviously, Bathika, I know that you're more experienced than a lot of the other early career chemists that we're talking to tonight. But the last thing that anyone wants is a fresh graduate coming straight out of university, going down on the shop floor and telling the bloke who's been doing his job 20 years how to do his job, right? That's only going to cause trouble. So leadership is often very well described when you're given a question like this. In the sort of things that the elements that Bathika talked about, taking responsibility, coordinating a response, very much the same things that Janice talked about, by the way, as well. Working with people so that they can achieve their tasks. That's what leadership is, right? In Australia. It's not ordering people about, it's not instructing people, it's working with people and being the point of the spear rather than the whole team in and of yourself, right? So I think that both Janice and Bathika's answers were good for this leadership question. And yeah, just always be a little bit like, if you're ever asked a question about leadership, be very, very cautious about using I instructed, I ordered, I told. Those are dangerous words to use. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Yeah, Janice agreed. There's a distinctly difference between leadership and management. Well, I mean, you know, I think good management. I mean, look, you know, at one point in my career, I had a line on the chart between me and another staff member. And in 5 years that we worked together, I never gave her an order and she never refused a polite request. And I think that's a damn good way of considering a management-employee relationship, right?
Definitely.
Simon, your question was, tell me about a time when you had to work with someone you didn't like.
Yeah, so I immediately thought of this one time in the third year labs in chemistry, where for an entire semester, I was partnered with someone that I didn't get along with. I didn't know them prior. Our personalities just didn't really mesh. So we had, I think, 3 assessments to get through in the whole semester, as well as, what was it? I think 4 hours a week together. So it's a significant portion of the time. So every time he said something that I felt started to frustrate me a little bit, I just took a breath before responding. And that made a really big difference. I like to think he did the same. This was a two-sided thing. And I think because we didn't quite mesh, we were often there for the full 4 hours a week, whereas in the past, I've often left quite early. But the tension between us also brought really good things out of us in our work, which was interesting. And I think I ended up getting a distinction for that subject in the end.
Outstanding.
Yeah, so I guess the takeaway there was that even though it's frustrating, it can still be a good thing in the end.
And what's your relationship with him like post that experience?
We like each other's stuff on Facebook.
Right. Okay. So who'd like to leap in? Where was the good and the bad in that answer? There was both. Janice?
I think that I would have liked, you said some good things came out of like the conflict or some good things came out of like the tension between the two of you, but you didn't really give an example. You sort of just like rushed to the end and were like, oh, I got a distinction in the subject. Yeah. But the distinction doesn't necessarily say, I don't know how like this unit worked, but it doesn't necessarily say much about how. Sorry, there's an announcement happening.
We can't hear it. Let's go. Carry on.
Sorry, I just lost my train of thought then. So basically, adding something distinct about like the lab work, what came good out of the lab work that was brought about from that tension, rather than like specifically the overall grade of the unit, because I think overall grades of units can be sometimes attributed more towards like the theoretical side of things if there was that in the unit. Yeah.
Okay. I will say this, Simon, you were way too ready to tell me about someone you didn't like. Right? That jarring start made it difficult for me to continue to follow. Okay, so whenever you are asked a question about having difficulty with someone, you always start, I generally get along with everyone. I think I'm an easygoing person, whatever. But, you know, in this case, and then you went on to say, someone, I think we just had a different approach to things, right? Now, throughout the answer, you did show empathy. You did show that you know, sometimes people are just different. You also showed that it wasn't a one-way street. He wasn't an AH and you a saint. You know, you made that specific things. You know, he probably did too, which is just a beautiful thing to have included. Okay, but just don't be ready to leap in with the negative. Remember, positive, negative, positive. So your first statement should be a positive. Okay, that's the thing that just roared out at me at the start. The other thing is, whenever you're talking about a conflict with someone, always try and show not just the outcome of the task, but the outcome of the interpersonal relationship. Okay, so early in my career, I found it difficult to relate to people. It took me time to learn to work with other people because I wasn't very good at it. But I did learn. And if you were to talk now to any of the people that I had difficulty with at the beginning of my career, they would all say, Dave has made great strides and we've ended up friends. Right? You know, so that's a good way. And by the way, that's entirely true. I was a prickly bastard when I first started in the workforce. And it took me time to learn to be around other people, but that was me. And, you know, it wasn't the other people, it was me. It took me time to learn. Matt, what are your thoughts about people who say, I genuinely get along with everyone, haven't really had a conflict with colleagues, yada, yada? Now, that much I agree with. If I were in the conflict situation with my co-workers, I would. I'd rather not go for a theoretical answer. I'd rather try and find an actual answer. But the other one that you can do, which is kind of sneaky, is you can say, look, I had two colleagues who weren't getting on, and this is how I tried to help the situation, or this is the way I did help the situation. Right? That's a good way of approaching it as well. If you were able to offer something like that, right? Look, the simple fact is we will never go. Well, few of us will go through our life and get along with everyone, and we all virtually will have to get along with. We'll have to work alongside someone we don't get along with. And we just have to find a way to make it work. I have a very interesting tale, and I think it's a good cautionary tale. I was brought into a company in a very senior position, and another staff member effectively felt that I had been parachuted in over the top of him. Add into the mix that he was a deeply religious person and I'm an atheist, which he frowned upon significantly, and the two of us were never going to get along. He spent a lot of time sniping at me, and I let myself respond. And both of us suffered in our respective roles. One day I had an epiphany. This guy just doesn't matter. And no matter what he said to me, I smiled and responded as if he'd said something pleasant. Within 6 months, he was gone from the company and I was promoted. So, you know, take from that what you will. Yeah, so we have reached 7:30. I hope this has been a useful exercise. My general advice to everybody is try to consider the main categories of stories, you know, about excelling in your workplace, about showing leadership, about dealing with difficult people. Showing leadership, showing initiative, showing, you know, the positive traits. Try to prepare 1 or 2 star stories for each of them that you have carefully prepared in advance, and then riff off them. So we've all watched a stand-up comedian on stage at some point, and we've watched them interact with the audience. You know, think, wow, that guy's fast, or that lady's fast. They could really interact with what the audience is saying to them. Do you understand that they don't actually do that? What they do is they have a dozen pre-prepared responses that they riff off those pre-prepared responses when they're talking to the audience, right? They're not as clever as to be able to think all of that funny stuff up on the spot, particularly under the nerves of the spotlight. And being on stage and being nervous and being in an interview and nervous are not completely dissimilar. So take that leaf from the comedian's book and pre-prepare some ideas. You don't want to follow it robotically, but if you've already thought about it, then you're in a good position to riff off your prepared notes. And that will make you seem that much more confident. You know, Miranda, when she gave her presentation, between the Friday when we talked, Saturday when we talked, Sunday, whatever it was.
Sunday and Monday.
And Monday. So 24 hours was chalk and cheese. And she'd prepared and she'd practiced a couple of times. And I was stunned and thrilled when Miranda gave me her presentation on Monday. It was fabulous, right? It doesn't take that much to stand out from the crowd, right? You know, the old joke, you know, it's not, you know, when you're faced with a lion, it's not about being the fastest runner. It's just being faster than the next guy. So the same is absolutely true of interviews. So I'd like to throw the floor open to any questions before we wrap up. Does anybody, you know, I like to think this has been a good workshop. I also note that if anyone is interested, we are running an intensive careers workshop this weekend where we practice job application skills. We practice more of this careers skills, interview skills. We prepare for each participant, we prepare an individual job search strategy, and then we follow up with introductions to useful contacts. So if anyone's interested in that event, that will be on this weekend. Janice, you had a question there? Or was that just... Yeah.
I do have a question. It's not actually specifically related to interviews, but I was wondering what's your opinion on psychometric testing? Because I've got one that I'm due to do in the next week or so.
What's my opinion?
What kind of psychometric stuff? What company?
So psychometric testing can fall into 3 categories. There is numerical testing, there is literacy testing, and there is personality tests. Now, personality tests, I think, are bunk. And literacy and numeracy tests, you can game them. You can go online and practice, right, and get better at doing literacy and numeracy tests. Now, personally, I quite enjoy doing them because I'm really good at them, but that doesn't mean that I'm smart. It just means I'm really good at those type of tests. But I mean, look, you know, I'll tell you a fun one. I went for a literacy, numeracy, and personality test for a job, 2006. Wow, God, the time passes. And never heard back from them. And under the law, you are allowed to get your results from these tests. And I requested 3 times that they be provided to me, and they didn't provide them. And in 2012, I was recruiting for a major project. There was going to be 200 jobs being created. And this consultancy contacted me, and I said, well, look, I'm very sorry, but I'm not going to be using your services because I have standards about how my candidates are treated. I've been a candidate at your consultancy, and you didn't treat me how I would expect to be treated. And they were shocked and horrified. And I said, you know, I asked for the results of my testing and you wouldn't provide it to me. And they went back and they said, we've looked at your personality test. Your personality test says you don't lie, so you must be telling the truth about this.
You don't lie.
Now, it's actually true. I am a reasonably honest person. So does that mean that the psychometric test was right? Who knows? I have a relatively low opinion of psychology as a science, but, you know, maybe there's something to it. Who knows?
I've been through a few psychometric tests before. In terms of like personality tests, I would suggest try not to select too many like very extreme answers, like extremely agree, extremely disagree, because employers don't want someone who like very extreme in either side.
Yeah. The other thing is be honest. Understand when they ask psychometric questions, they will ask the same question in 3 or 4 times in different ways.
Yeah, be consistent.
They're looking for discrepancies.
Yeah.
So just be honest.
And also there may be some questions that just asking, just to check if you are honest. For example, I have never lied before. Obviously, everyone lies before, right? Is not honest.
Yeah.
So,
have you ever stolen anything? I mean, I answered yes to both of those questions.
So I think that's the top tip I can give.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I'd like to say, since I just admitted on camera to having stolen stuff, I walked out of a shop accidentally with something in my pocket, then walked back in and paid. So, but yes,
I've done a similar thing with food. So.
Is making jokes in an interview risky? Depends on the jokes. Obviously, I would never tell anything that had a political, religious, ethnic, racist, sexist component to it. But a little bit of levity is not the worst thing in the world. So, you know, it's certainly, if you're able to crack wise in an interview, it says you're feeling comfortable.
I actually have a question. So someone gave me like advice in terms of answering star questions. He told me it would be great to have a short summary at the end, just to say what you learned from this experience, or what would you do in a similar situation in the future, because your past experience is a mirror of your future action. That's so would you recommend to have like a short summary? Okay.
Yeah, a very good tip. Yeah. I mean, particularly if you've talked about something difficult, say, yeah, look, I think I did a good job, but I knowing what I do now, I think I could do even better. Great way of summarizing, right? Absolutely. Any other questions coming through? All right, well, I'll wrap it up. I'll stick around at the end just in case anybody has anything further, but I'll wrap it up for tonight. So tonight has been another event as part of the RACI Careers Development Program. Through webinars, networking events, mentoring, lectures and workshops, the RACI Careers Development Program aims to help graduating students and early career scientists get the best possible start in their careers. Our upcoming events include the Intensive Careers Workshop this weekend. Our next camaraderie session is the first Thursday of next month. And in early November, there's actually going to be national networking events face-to-face for the first time in 2021. So that's going to be awesome. You can find all of those on the RACI webpage, raci.org.au. On the events page, you'll find everything that's coming up. The recording of this event will be uploaded to the RACI Careers Development YouTube channel over the next few days, as well as to our careers site at raci.org.au. In the meantime, thanks to all of the brave souls who joined the panel tonight, to Simon, Janice, Miranda, and Bathika. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, DCS Technical, Envirolab, and Laboratory Credit Union. There we go. Now, Bathika, before you go, tell me, you're still waiting to hear. Is that the story? You're still waiting to hear about the job? Because I've got every single finger and toe crossed at the moment.
Yeah, Dave, I am still expecting their response. Actually, I think I was interviewed 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 2 days, I got a call from Envirolab. And she actually asked me to, Nancy actually asked me, she wants to contact with my
referees.
Yeah, my referees. And then I provided her the contact. And then the following week, actually, I tried to contact her again, that is there any problem to reach my referees? So then she informed me, one of my referee was my colleague in my previous place. So she first wants my direct boss, the contact of my direct supervisor. Then I provided my that contact too. After that, actually, I was not getting any response. So I again contacted with her, and then she said actually they have to discuss with the MD about the part-time role. Whenever whenever the recruitment process will be smooth, then they again contact with my referees. This week I contacted with my referees, both of my referees. They didn't get any call yet.
Okay. All right. Well, sometimes the wheels grind slowly, but as I say, I've got every finger and toe crossed for you. I'm really hopeful for this. So, and of course, if you get that job, we'll be seeing each other because I work at that lab as well. So
yeah, I knew that, and I'm really every day I'm just keep checking my mobile if I get the call from Nancy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Best of luck with all of that.
Yeah.
Miranda, I know you were unsuccessful for that job with Lion, but just remember, getting the interview is a win in itself. You have to be in the top 1 or 2% just to get the interview, and you should consider that an absolute win. That experience will be invaluable, and you will succeed from here. So well done you.
Yeah, finger crossed tomorrow. I have another one tomorrow.
Outstanding. Excellent. All right. Well, so the link for the careers workshop is in the chat, and the registration closes tomorrow at 3 p.m. So if you want to get in quick. We keep it as a small workshop, so the places are limited. So yeah, if you want to get in quick. The other thing is, of course, the mentoring program for 2022 is open. Anyone who would like to be a mentee next year, please do get in contact with us. Everyone here is a mentee. What have you guys got to say about it? Would we recommend it?
Yes. I already, one of my colleague from UNSW, actually, he contacted with me to know about this program. And I recommended him. Actually, he was confused as he's from chemical engineering. Can he participate in this program? Is it for only chemistry
students?
No,
I'm from chemical engineering.
Yeah. If they're a chemical engineer, we should be able to help them. Yeah.
I just recommended the program. Whoever asked me, because I learned a lot from this program.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, David has asked a question, by the way. How do you approach the topic of salary negotiation if and when it comes up in the interview? Okay, this is a very fraught topic, and there's no good answer because as there are so many different people, there are so many different employers as well. Yeah, God, we could talk for an hour about salary. I guess the short answer is do your research before the job and know your worth. Talk to your professional association about what salary should be available. But I guess, particularly at the beginning of your career, I wouldn't be precious about salary. I would be far more focused on what the opportunity is, how you're going to grow in that opportunity, what you're going to learn, because a couple of $1,000s here or there is nothing compared to tens of thousands of dollars worth of experience. Now, I'm not saying let yourself be ripped off. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying find the balance. You know, you have to live and you have to earn enough to be worth your while, but at the same time, you know, get in there, prove your worth. I will say that in my early career, my strategy was never to ask about salary, but just to constantly try to be as useful as I could, to take on new tasks, to pursue the things that interested me. And what I found was I would do a task for 6 to 12 months, I would be promoted and given more money. And it got to the point where the money that I was being offered was silly money. So, you know, I virtually didn't have to ask for it. So
I'm going to head off, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for a great session, and thanks for the little bit of interview practice that you
and thank you so much for participating. It's a brave person who participates, and I thank you so much for it.
No worries. I'll catch you next time.
Okay.